Good morning, Willow community. My name's Carrie O'Malley. You might know me as Miss Carrie or Miss O'Malley. And today, this is actually my first morning gathering ever. Though I've been working on them behind the scenes since we started doing them virtually in the spring. Still, I'm excited to get to talk to you guys today, especially about our virtue of the month, compassion, and how it ties to generous listening. We'll read a book called The Rabbit Listened, and we'll hear a little bit more about generous listening from someone who's really great at it, Krista Tippett, the host of On Being. But first, let's breathe. Let's get in the zone. I'm going to turn the breathing bubble on so we can all breathe together. Compassion. Like I said before, it's our virtue of the month. Now, I had to put a definition of compassion up here. It's got quite a few big words in it for those of you that can read it. The definition of compassion is a sympathetic consciousness of others' distress together with a desire to alleviate it. Lots of big words. But I still like this definition because when I think of compassion, I think of three things, and they're all in this definition. Here's what I think of: awareness, understanding, and a desire to help. All three of those things are part of practicing compassion. First, awareness, that consciousness in the definition there. We have to first know that someone isn't feeling well, that they might be mad or sad, or that they're going through something tough. Being there, being conscious and present of how our friends, our classmates, anyone that we interact with is feeling is step one of compassion. Understanding. That means we have to dig a little deeper to really figure out why they're feeling that way. And it's a big part of getting to that last thing that we often rush to, a desire to help. When we see that one of our friends, a classmate, whoever it might be, is going through something tough or is sad or mad or they need us, we want to go straight to that help. But first, we really need to understand. We need to understand what they're feeling, and we really need to understand how we can best help them. And really, one of the best ways to understand how our friends are feeling is by listening to them. But there's a way of listening that's helpful and a way of listening that's not as helpful. I'd like to focus on that first one, and I'd like to give it a name that I'm kind of borrowing here from Krista Tippett, the host of On Being, who some parents might be familiar with from her great radio show and podcast. I'd like to talk about generous listening. Now, I know there's a lot of big words on this slide again, too. But if we break it down here, I think it's a really great quote, and it's all really important. Krista Tippett defines generous listening as something that's powered by curiosity, which is something that we all have and love at Willow. We're all very curious. And if we can really invite and nurture curiosity in ourselves when it comes to how we talk to and listen to our friends and family, that will make us the best listeners we can be. Because when you listen with generosity and curiosity, you're not running straight to that desire to help. You're not going straight to answers. You're really listening. You're really staying open, and you're really trying to find out more about how the person feels. Krista points out that generous listening also involves vulnerability, which can be hard for us when we are talking to friends in need. We don't want to admit that we don't know. We want to have all the answers for our friends. We want to be strong. But really being vulnerable, being willing to be open, to being surprised by what someone says, to being really honest with our own experiences that might be similar to what they're going through, that's part of generous listening too. And this last sentence here is, again, all about that understanding that we want to look for when we listen to others. And it's also about patience. All right, you want to see generous listening in action? Me too. I think the best thing we could do is read a book The Rabbit Listened by Corey Dorfeld. Let's listen together now.
One day, Taylor decided to build something new, something special. Something amazing. Taylor was so proud. But then, out of nowhere, things came crashing down. The chicken was the first to notice. Cluck, cluck, what a shame. I'm so sorry this happened. Let's talk about it. Cluck, cluck. But Taylor didn't feel like talking, so the chicken left. Next came the bear. Grr, roar, how horrible. I bet you feel so angry. Let's shout about it. Grr, roar, grr. But Taylor didn't feel like shouting, so the bear left. The elephant knew just what to do. Trumpa-duh, I can fix this. We just need to remember exactly the way things were. But Taylor didn't feel like remembering, so the elephant also left. One by one they came. The hyena, let's laugh about it. The ostrich, go, let's hide and pretend nothing happened. The kangaroo, tis tis, what a mess. Let's throw it all away. And the snake, shh, let's go knock down someone else's. But Taylor didn't feel like doing anything with anybody. So eventually they all left until Taylor was alone. In the quiet, Taylor didn't even notice the rabbit, but it moved closer and closer until Taylor could feel its warm body. Together they sat in silence until Taylor said, "Please stay with me." The rabbit listened. The rabbit listened as Taylor talked. The rabbit listened as Taylor shouted. The rabbit listened as Taylor remembered and laughed. The rabbit listened to Taylor's plans to hide, to throw everything away, to ruin things for someone else. Through it all, the rabbit never left. And when the time was right, the rabbit listened to Taylor's plans to build again. "I can't wait," Taylor said. "It's going to be amazing."
Wasn't that a great story? I'll tell you a little bit about what the story means to me as you think about what it meant to you. The first thing that I learned from the rabbit in the story was that just being there means everything. When the rabbit first goes to comfort Taylor and sees that he's upset, the rabbit just stays by his side, lets Taylor know that he's there. When our friends are upset or going through something difficult, sometimes just being by their side means everything. The second thing the rabbit taught me is that listening without judgment or trying to solve the problem is important. When Taylor started talking to him, after some time being quiet, the rabbit, unlike the other animals, didn't jump in with all of his ideas about what to do. The rabbit just listened. I don't know if you noticed this about the story too, but Taylor needed to do all of the things that the other animals suggested. He needed to talk. He needed to get angry. He needed to throw it all away or even think about doing something mean. He needed to go through all of those emotions to get back to the place where he wanted to build again. What that taught me is that even though you might have a good idea or a good solution or a good way for your friend to handle their problems, your friend might not be ready to hear it until they've really been listened to until you really listen to them. I did have one problem with the rabbit in the story, though. The rabbit was just quiet the whole time. And I'm going to borrow from Krista Tippett again with this quote here, that listening is not actually primarily about being quiet. It's not just being quiet. It's really about being present, and that means not just being there, but being engaged. Really listening means really hearing what the person is saying and taking in those thoughts and ideas, thinking about them deeply, and then responding in a way that makes sense in the moment. So asking honest, curious, and open questions is part of generous listening. I think the rabbit could have asked a few more questions. All right, I'm sure you have so many ideas about how you can practice generous listening. Has someone ever listened to you really well? Is there something you've learned from that you can share with us? I'd love to hear it. Here's some ideas about how to practice generous listening from the book, from Krista Tippett, and from me. First, be present and aware of each other's feelings. Again, just keeping our eyes open and looking out for each other is step one. It's where we start with compassion. Being curious about how the other person feels. Really, honestly, wanting to know. Maybe you can't tell if a person is mad or upset. It's okay to ask. Sometimes it's best to just be there quietly for a while, like the rabbit in the story. That's what Taylor needed in that moment. When the person's ready to talk, really hear and think about what they say to you. Ask questions that come from a place of curiosity and care. A question that comes from a place of curiosity and care can be really simple. Like, how are you feeling right now? What happens? What can I do? It doesn't have to be a difficult question. It just has to be honest and curious and coming from a place of true care. I'm sure you all have great ideas and solutions for your friends' problems. You're all very creative and thoughtful. And this is not about holding back those ideas. You should share them. Just look for the time that's right and make sure you've really listened first. That way, if you've really listened, you'll know if your idea is really going to be helpful and if the person is really ready to hear it. Often the best ideas come from us talking things out together. All right, Willow community, those are my ideas for how we can all be more generous listeners and to truly listen with compassion. None of us are perfect listeners. We're all working on these things. So I look forward on working on being a more generous listener together with all of you. And I can't wait to listen to all the things you have to say today and every day. All right, guys, have a great school day, a great Friday, a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you soon.